All right, teammates. We are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the number one podcast on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. To my regular listeners, you already know how it goes down when you hit the play button on this show. The challenges, the obstacles, the things that are getting in the way of your success or whatever it is you're trying to do in life. We're here to indirectly tell you you are not going through it alone. And today I have someone that I like to refer to as the definition of an old soul, someone who reaffirms this concept of it is never too young to start professionally developing, personally developing, and really getting a hold on the important things that life is as you get older. I mean, he started at 17 years old, he's dealing with COVID in high school, and he was able to take a lot of the things that would break a lot of people, dealt with family loss, so many things he's dealt with as a young person, that it would be so easy for him to have this victim mentality. And as you're gonna hear in a couple seconds here, he does not at all walk around with the victim mentality. If you just look him up, you'll just be energized by his spirit, his goals, and everything like that. So, all that being said, James Brackin, welcome to the show. How are you?
Man, thank you so much for the introduction. Feeling really seen and appreciated and grateful for the conversation we're about to have, man. It really is. I hope that my energy in some way can just give off to other people because that's really all I can do, man. I'm grateful for this opportunity.
Yes, and listening to you because I'm a big sports guy and I played football since I was 7 all the way through school to 22. And one of the things that my favorite coach would always tell us, especially if we were going into a game that knew we were outman, he would say adversity. This is
Mm.
makes you a man. Adversity teaches life. And you were actually born in a situation where you weren't expected. There's certain things that happened when it came to your childbirth, and you still were able to compete in baseball. You were still able to do a lot of things that a lot of people wouldn't have expected you to go do. And you did that by losing an uncle. You lost your father and your uncle and your grandfather around that time where he was working and all that. So, to start things off, why don't you just go in a little bit on how you grew up, your background a little bit, and then we'll kind of go from there, man.
Yeah, man. Like you said, I mean, I almost died when I was born. I had about 5 blood transfusions. The doctor was kind of like, "Hey, I don't know if this is the right blood type, but we're gonna see, and if not, you're gonna die either way. So, or you're either gonna die or you're gonna live." And like that was kind of it.
Mm-hmm.
From there, yeah, I lost my father and my uncle both at 37 years old. I didn't realize how young that was until the older I got, and the older I get, the more I realize how young it really is. My
Yeah.
grandfather passed a few months before his retirement, and that really woke some things up for me early on. And my life to help me realize I don't want to live a life that is just not. I don't want to live a life that I'm doing a lot of things that I don't like to do. Like conversations like this, connecting with amazing humans, like that is the coolest thing ever. And being able to
Right.
do that in every way and impacting people, that's really always been the intention behind things. So I left high school, realized that college wasn't the path for me, got into personal development, invested into a coach, and really transformed my life from there. Invested more money than I had in my bank account, kind
Mhm.
of just changed my life. And there's so many pathways we can go down, but that's a little bit.
Yeah, because one of the things that I do want to kind of pause you there because as we were talking before we started recording, there's been some incredible people on your show. I mean, authors like Seth Godin, and as I'm looking, if you're watching this on video, you see the 4 Hour Work Week, you see a book that gets mentioned so many times on the show, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I mean, so many incredible reads, but I heard you say that you weren't a reader in high school. Like you did everything in a way where you thought it was actually cool to not read the book and still get a great grade. So I'd love for you to speak on the contrast of when people are choosing to read the right books versus the school system and what they teach in terms of, okay, I'm just going to give this person this book and, hopefully they read it, hopefully they don't. Can you speak a little bit about how you were able to develop in that and how that actually helped?
Yeah, man, I have a really tough time believing in the school system because I realized my entire life, like my mom, my sister always told me, you're gonna eventually start reading books. You'll start liking them eventually. Hated them my
My dad,
entire
my
life. I
dad, my
was
dad
like,
was like that too. Like he'd make me read to him, or like I wouldn't
yeah,
like these, all the ones I have now. You would have never expected, never, because
yeah.
I was like, yeah, I hated reading.
I never enjoyed it. I mean, every English class I had it with a few buddies of mine where we would just mess around the entire class, just never get anything of value, and that was always what it was.
Yes.
And it wasn't until I left high school and I realized again, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I really knew what I didn't want in life. And
Hmm.
so books just came across that through listening to podcasts and stuff like that. And so I started reading books. And when I started to read books, I started realizing, well, this is actual value. Like this is stuff that I was never even close to taught in high school. This can actually be applicable to my life. And for someone that, like you said, could have taken the victim role It was the things, the information that really was instilled into me that made me realize, like, hey, I have the control over my attitude towards this life. And so many other things from business to personal development to personal finance. Like you said, I've been able to speak with Seth Godin. I just thought this was the coolest thing ever. If I can read the book, I still have a lot of questions based on my understanding of the book. What if I go talk to the author? And so that was kind of the emphasis a lot for the podcast. But
Mhm.
I think one thing I will recommend or say is I looked at the side of my room because I have so many books over there. I'm waiting for my bookshelf to come in because I have too many books. My last bookcase broke.
Yes.
But when I first got started, I wished I didn't read so much and I was reading more with intention. So reading more so of what skill am I trying to develop or what problem am I looking to overcome rather than just reading to read. So
Yeah.
definitely have changed my perspective on reading, but that's kind of
Yeah.
why.
That's actually what I was going to ask you. That was going to be the next question that I was going to ask you because now you actually have a coaching business and you are helping other entrepreneurs, you're helping other business owners and stuff like that. But it started out with a huge investment that I was like, man, I couldn't. I was thinking to my 17-year-old self or 18-year-old self, and I'm like, man, I don't know. That's a tough one. So like when you already mentioned this a little bit, I'll let you tell the story a little bit. But when you graduate high school, the expectation, and it was in upstate New York, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So the expectation is to go to college. And if you can think back to your high school self, the ones that don't go to college, they get looked at as if they're failures. They get looked at kind of in a way that, oh, you're just not successful. You wasted your time and stuff like that. And you actually went and in the real working world. I think it was at Apple or Dick's Sporting Goods or something like that. Walk us through that transition because I know that's a really, really difficult thing to develop as a younger person when again, you flip a switch, your high school graduation's here, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, figure it out, kid. So, walk us through exactly what happened after your high school graduation and then eventually investing in that coach that you mentioned.
Yeah, it really is true, man. I mean, so I was working at Dick's Sporting Goods when I was at high school, and
Oh,
I
during
knew
your
that
summer.
college.
Okay.
Yeah, but I knew college wasn't meant for me. So I thought I'm going to get into real estate. So I remember going around, and this was for probably 6 months. My entire existence was only real estate. I mean, I was taking every single test that I had to take to be able to take the course when I became 18. I was in tune with the team. I was like, hey, I need to be surrounded by these kind of people. So I started surrounding myself with people in real estate, doing stuff for free, just really trying to be around it, going to like everything that you could possibly think of. When I turned 18, like just about a week before I turned 18, I realized I did not want to do real estate at all. I wanted to maybe be an investor, but I definitely didn't want to be an agent.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, I was working at Apple around that time, and I just knew that, man, I remember going into work one day and talking to someone that had been there for longer than I'd been alive at the time. I think I was probably 18 or 19. He'd been there for 21 years.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, man, I just don't want to be here anymore. It'd been probably 7 hours. I was just like, long shift, just don't want to be here. And he goes, you get used to it. And I remember I put my 2 weeks in 2 weeks later.
Hmm.
And I didn't even go in for those 2 weeks that I put my 2 weeks in for because it just scared the hell out of me. I was like, no, I will never get used to this.
Yeah.
And so yeah, man, I
And just to
invested about
pause you there, I want to make
uh,
sure the listeners don't brush that over because a lot of you guys who are working 9 to 5s or the older people that and I'm not trying to say this in a way where I'm diffusing or making it unimportant what it is you do. I think it is important what you do, but understand when you're talking to young people coming into the world, this is a young man who lost his father, lost his uncle, and lost his grandfather a couple of days before his retirement. Your mentality was like, look, I don't want any parts of that. Your mentality was of a place where, hey, if you tell me something in a certain way, I'm not going to like it. It's going to rub me the wrong way. And I think that's important because I'm all about teaching communication and cohesive staff development. When you're talking to a person that is coming in from the younger generation, it's important that you have a positive mentality. It's important that you give off a positive energy. I can only, as you said that, I can plenty of people I've talked to that had that same energy. You'll get used to it. As if I want to get used to it. I don't want
yeah.
to get used to it. That's the thing. One of the things actually that I remember Robert Kiyosaki saying in one of his keynotes is like, I don't want a job. I don't want to get used to this miserable. I don't want to get used to that type of mentality. And it's important that you guys communicate in a certain way. So I want to make sure that point is clear.
No, it's powerful, man. And I think I've read Rich Dad Poor Dad probably 2 years, 3 years before, and I'm sitting in that place thinking that exact same thing of like, dude, this is not no, there's no way. I feel one of my first coaches, and I'll get into how I got into coaching.
Okay, good.
He told me that you do a disservice by not bringing your unique gifts into the world, and that has stuck with me to this day because I think every single person has something to give to the world. They may not know what it is, they may not know how to access it, they
Yeah.
might not know what direction to go and by any means,
Hmm.
but you have something to give.
Yeah.
And if you're going to let your fear of failure, your imposter syndrome, whatever is coming up for you, hold you back,
Hmm.
you're just doing a disservice to the world. And
Yeah.
so that was something that really allowed me to step into coaching at 17, a quote unquote life coach. It makes no sense. I've lived no life. How am I able to do this?
Girl, yeah.
My first,
I'm
my
thinking
first
like you're
coach.
saying, I'm thinking about how we're gonna win this next game. I'm all in the football. I'm the life coach. That's crazy.
I mean, it was crazy to me too, but I mean, I was surrounded by probably 1,000 other coaches
Hmm.
that were in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, having the
Right.
same fears I did. And so it was like, how does my age have anything to do with this if they have the same fear that I have, and
Huh.
we're getting the same information, we're learning the same stuff. So what
Huh.
makes them different? The thing that I realized was when you make the investment, a lot of people think that's when the work ends. For me, I bet more money than I had in my bank account. That's when the work started. Like I had to make it happen. And so
Right.
I was showing up so much more than other coaches were. And so I was able to succeed in ways that other coaches just never even got their first client. And within a few months, my award right there, I contract 10K in 30 days. And I was 17, I think maybe 18 around that time. And
Mhm.
I didn't even believe it, to be completely honest. But
Right.
my first coach told me was you don't have to have the answers, you just have to have the questions. And so
Yeah.
what I found is, like you said at the beginning of this, is like hopefully my energy just comes across of allowing people to be their authentic, vulnerable self and
Mhm.
work through some challenges that maybe they're too close to that I can help them gain some perspective on.
Right. So walk us through a little bit about what the coach did that you decided to invest in. What was the program about? How did you find it or they find you? Where did that connection come from?
Yeah, so I was listening to a podcast. It was
Mhm.
by one of the biggest podcasters in the world. His name's Rob Dial, called the Mindset Mentor. Has
Mhm.
like 300, 400 million downloads total. So like one of the biggest podcasts. I knew I wanted to start a podcast. I had no idea what a coach was, but I
Mhm.
knew I wanted to start a podcast. This guy's clearly doing it for a living. So
Yeah.
let me learn from him. At the end of one of the podcasts, they were talking about a coaching program. Again, no idea what a coach was, but I knew that over the past few years from, reading books and investing in myself and listening to podcasts, and just my life changed dramatically in such a short amount of time. I went from not even wanting to wake up to like showing up so intentionally for every single goal that I could ever imagine. And my life was just moving so quick. And so I realized maybe I'm not where I'd like to be 100%, but I'm definitely a lot further along than where I was before. And so I can
Mhm.
gain some perspective for other people. And so the coaching program was essentially how to become a coach. So, like, what does a coach even do?
Mhm.
Um, there's a big difference between a therapist and a coach, right? We're focusing on the future. I'm not giving anyone advice. I think that's a big misunderstanding a lot of people have about coaching. It's like, right, so you're 17. How do you have any experience to give people advice? And it's like, well, if anything, it's more of a superpower because then my biases aren't so skewed towards just
Right.
a dogma that is not positive. It's not open. It's not optimistic. And so I can give people perspective when they're in these dark days where,
Yeah.
I bring this light to the conversation by not even giving advice, by just genuinely being there and kind of reflecting back.
Yes, and that's actually a really, really important point. I mean, I wish I would have heard that maybe about 5 or 6 years ago when I went and hired a coach. Is I hired a coach based on what they were already presenting, what they already had, which again, that's just
Mhm.
step one. But to hire the right coach, they have to be asking you the right questions. And you as a
Yeah.
coach, anybody that's listening, whether it's the owners or whether it's a parent, doesn't matter who it is, nobody has all the answers. The key to who, if you're going to invest your money in, and we're talking 5 figure plus type of money, high ticket stuff, is the people that you're giving that money to need to be asking you the right questions. It's up to you to find the answers. And that takes the work that you're doing on the inside, the stuff that's burning on your inside and the message and everything that you want to get out to the world. It has to be burning that hard. It has to be burning. The fire has to be lit to the point where you would pay the 5 figures to have someone really bring it out of you in a certain way. So, that leads me to when it comes to, you had mentioned there were other coaches in the program and you were able to excel and stuff like that. What was it about that? Now I know again, you said you had to make it work because you didn't have, you spent a lot of money in it, but at the same time, you're also very young and it would be easy for you to say, look, I've dumping this. Let me go move on to something else because I'm so young. What was it about like the day to day of being coaching that made it so you were able to say, this is what I'm sticking with. I got my podcast, I got my story, and I'm going to keep going even when you're dealing with rejection. You're going to be, I mean, I could almost imagine the amount of rejection you've dealt with. Kid, you're 17. Get the hell off my phone. Walk us through some of like how the curriculum was.
Yeah, it's funny. I think something that gave me a lot of confidence early on was one of my first clients was a 43-year-old woman that had already had a massive ATM business. Like she already achieved what you would call success. So us working together was working on a book that was just kind of like just putting all of the money that she had into this book to it was
She
like her
wanted to
passion
write a book.
project. Right.
All right.
And she just had this passion for it. For 8, 9 years, she was thinking about doing it. And so she'd seen me on social media for probably 6 months straight. We connected a little bit. We talked about working together, but nothing really moved forward. And
Mm-hmm.
after 6 months, I followed up and I said, "Hey, like, do you still want to do this? Like, is it still a priority for you?" And
Mm-hmm.
she said, "Yeah." We started working together. That alone was like a massive just breakthrough. It's like I'm 18 years old at the time, working with a 43-year-old woman that already has a massive business.
Mm-hmm.
Again, where am I? Where do I have any role in this? But what it was helping her. I mean, 8, 9 years thinking about a book. All I
Mm-hmm.
did was just get her into action. That's all I
Yeah.
did. I mean, that's all I did. I mean, it's
Yeah.
what my what one of my favorite coaches told me on my podcast is it's permission and reminders. We need permission because we can give it to ourselves, but we always get in our own way. Like we just need someone else to be like, "Hey, you can do this thing."
Mm-hmm.
And then we need reminders. I think the one thing that every human does more than anything is we forget. We forget of our infinite capability. We forget, there's days where we feel at our lowest and then there's days we feel at our best. And so what a coach does is help you get back to your best. Really. It's like I'm not doing anything externally, but it's like you said, we're going internal and really addressing the things that, childhood trauma that how would I hold a space for to be able to do that? I mean, it's just at the end of the day, just holding space and just allowing people to talk through their things and holding them accountable to doing the things that they said they would do.
Yes, and I'm really glad you mentioned the element of following up because what you did also mention previously is that the fact that you spent 6 months trying to be a real estate agent, and I'm not sure if it was just commercial, if it was just residential, however it was, but I'm sure there was tons of things, tons of material in which you had to use now that you use now in your coaching business when it comes to what you learned. So can you speak a little bit about just the element of being productive, getting them, because again, there's a lot of people that are out there, they're lost, they don't know what to do. And when it comes to just getting the ball rolling, they don't realize how much maybe doing something that didn't turn out to you being an agent could help in you later on in your business and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of people don't really want to be an entrepreneur. What they want is just they want freedom. They want freedom over their time. But I
Yeah.
think like what I realized was when became a coach, I was still working at Apple at the time.
Mhm.
It was kind of like my time off from work it was almost a great thing because then it gave me full force to like only focus on this thing. I only had so much time. But when I left Apple and then it was all coaching, it was like now I got a whole day. I don't even know what to do with it. And I need to figure out what can I do to make sure my day is like
Huh.
actually moving myself forward, right? And I think a lot of people get
Yeah.
stuck in that. They almost have too much time and they don't know what to spend time on.
Right.
And something that a lot of people ask me when I go on podcasts is like, what's your 5, 10 year vision? And I always tell them I have no idea where I'm going to be even a year from now because
Mhm.
all I focus on is my day-to-day actions. Like, what can I do today? I can't control the outcome, but I can control the input. And so for me, productivity just looks like showing up for the most important thing first thing in the morning. Most days, honestly, I'm done with work by 3, 4 p.m. because I front load so much in the beginning of the day. And if I want to work in the afternoon, I can, but
Mhm.
I think a lot of it is just prioritizing and knowing what is important versus urgent, because a lot of people just go to the urgent instead of the important.
Yes, and you've mentioned two companies that I'm a huge admirer of, which is Apple and Dick's Sporting Goods, and both of those are very customer-based things. Apple only sells
Yeah.
like 4 or 5 products, and Dick's Sporting Goods, we're all knowing it, me being the sports guy that I am. When it comes to your experience there, how has it helped you now relate to people? Yeah, because I think that's really worth mentioning as well. Uh, a lot of people, again, you do these jobs and you kind of blow it off. You don't realize how much it can be actually helping your entrepreneurial vision. Yet you were able to do these jobs and realize, hey, me just helping someone with an iPad can ultimately be the way that's going to help when it comes to my people skills.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely did. I think one thing that really I realized not a lot of other people did was I remember one of my leads at Apple walking up to me and goes, "Dude, how do you?" I was working with two older women, and then the next person I was working with was like a 16-year-old dude.
All right.
And he was like, "How do you talk to these women so like so easily? Like, how are you able to just make conversation about anything?" And it's
Yeah.
like, well, because I almost act like I'm non-existent in the conversation, and it's simply about them. And
Yeah.
like, I like I will ask a trillion questions, and that's how it's always been. I've just always been such a curious person. That's why I think coaching makes so much sense for me, and podcasting is like I want it to be so off of me and so on the other person that
Mhm.
it's almost like they leave the conversation 99% of the time feeling like they won the conversation, even if they talked the entire time. And
Yeah.
so for me, it was I was able to really build a skill at connecting with almost anyone. And I
Nice.
don't think I think communication is one of the best skills that you can develop, but I don't think a lot of people really go into it intentionally, I would say.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that because, like you, my podcast started with this bad boy right here. I was actually at the time I was sleeping in a gym, and I remember it would be after everyone would leave, and I, put it on top of a gym bag, and I just record. And now, again, look what it's called. I got equipment, everything is, moving right. So, speak to us a little bit about how you started yours and how you were able to establish your podcast. When all this kind of happened.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I started my podcast in my car
Yeah,
with
you're right.
no microphone, didn't even have use my phone. Like I was recording off of like GarageBand on my computer, man.
Yeah.
And I think
Good
I
old
love
days,
that I
man.
started
You
there.
brought it back. Yeah, you brought it back. Those are the good old days.
Yeah, man. I love that I started there because I look now and I haven't done any in-person interviews yet, but I've been able to connect with some profound humans that I just
Yeah,
genuinely you'd never think it would happen so quick.
right.
Um and so for me, I think it started off then because I think the most difficult part for most people isn't it's like starting and then continuing, but for me it was just holding a standard to myself. Like when people ask me what's success, it's like my standards. It's like am I doing what I said I would do?
Hmm.
I've released an episode every single week for almost 4 years.
Hmm.
If I can't control anything else, I'm just going to make sure that I do the thing. And so that's been always been the practice from, from the start, really.
Mhm. How has the numbers how much do you pay attention to the numbers? And I ask this because there was a period where I literally could only depend on one listen, and that was gonna be my mom. Like,
Mm,
so even if I, like, after a couple of months, it's like, okay, I know I didn't listen to it yet, and I know my mother didn't listen to it yet, and I got maybe 5 views or 5 listens or whatever it was. I know I'm making progress. So
yeah.
I know when you're starting off, and again, you don't know where it's going, and you're doing once a week. Walk us through, and especially for the people out there who have this excuse of, I'm going to start it. Like most podcasts get started, they're done, they fizzle out by, I think, like the 17th episode or something like that.
Yeah.
How much did you really think about that or pay attention to that? And how were you able to keep moving forward?
Yeah, I almost act like that was non-existent as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
The the infinite games really does align with me. It's like
Mhm.
if you can do something that even if you lose, you win, I think you're winning in life. So like even if I were to get no views for years on end, I'm still gaining something from this. I started this not to get views, but because I want to read books and talk to the author. I want to impact people in a positive way. Like
Mhm.
I'm gaining something from it, even if no one watches it, because it's still like the podcast started as like a public journal. It was like, I'm learning these things. I want to give this to the world. Hopefully it helps people, but even me just repeating it helps me understand it deeper. And so it's the same thing goes with having conversations with people. It's like, I would do this for free. I do this for free. So it's like, why would I ever stop?
Right. Now, what was your strategy towards getting people on, eventually going from solo to now doing the interviews?
Yeah, I think the main perspective that I've held is it's not if, but it's when.
Hmm.
It's like whoever I want to get on, I will get on, period. There's no question about that. That's the
Right.
core of the podcast is like, unlearning these limiting beliefs that hold us back. So I've just reached out to, I think for most people, if they're getting started, just make a list of 100 people you want to get on the show. And I can guarantee you'll probably get at least 12 if you reach out to them, like whatever the number is, but you'll get a lot more than you think. But just genuinely reaching out, email, DMs, all that kind of stuff, and just trying to provide value for that person
Right.
and not just asking. So trying to find a way to maybe it's not the views that's the way I provide value, but maybe it's making them feel seen and appreciated by doing good research or whatever it may be.
Right, and you said the right words, genuinely reach out. All right. Nowadays, there's a lot of interaction, there's a lot of messages,
Mm,
a lot of stuff being put out there, and people's filter is up, people's bullshit meter is up. Where if you're just reaching out and just trying to sell them some nonsense, it's easy to detect that kind of shit now you have to have a genuine interest. In fact, I remember actually when I just started listening to podcasts, it was Eric Thomas, the hip hop preacher.
yeah,
He
love
has a
him.
show with a couple of his, right hand men, and he was talking about someone else who was getting in the game, and he said, yeah, somebody tried to get me to listen to their podcast. I'm like, how many episodes? And he goes, all right, three. And he goes, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Like, I am not going to listen to something that only has three episodes. Like, call me when you get to 100. And, speaking of Seth Godin, he actually has something. I think it was when he put the book out, The Dip. It was The Dip.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember reading that, The Dip, where he said, don't start it unless you're prepared to go to 100 episodes. And I remember I posted that my 100th episode and all that. So, all that being said, well, I know you kind of already answered that. But what do you see, because you're so young and because you have so much life ahead of you, do you see yourself kind of working, building a family through this? How do you see the future playing out? Like, I guess, taking your business and then aligning it with personal goals and things like that. Because I know personally how difficult the task is to take something that you're putting your heart and soul into and then trying to mesh it with a life and then build a family and all that kind of stuff. So how do you kind of navigate those waters?
Yeah, man, that's a loaded question. I think that it's difficult when you and that's why the podcast it's never been about views or money or anything like that because if you do then you lose the joy in it. Same thing that goes with coaching. It's like if I ever need a client, oh, I don't want to work with that client because I'm not coming from a good place. And
Yeah.
so that's just what I want to make sure that I continue to come from, just a place of abundance of like working with people I genuinely believe I can help, working with people that I want to work with,
Hmm.
continuing to have conversations every single week. And then, dude, family, I can't even honestly fathom at this moment in my life. I just turned 21. I feel so
Right.
old and so young at the same time. Like you said, an old soul of like, but just genuinely trying to allow life to unfold an amazing way and how it's supposed to, and just continue to trust in that, honestly.
Yes, and simply take it day by day. And I ask that not just for you, but also for a lot of the younger people. I work a lot with former athletes, guys that are transitioning, and they're trying to figure out what it is they're going to be doing as soon as the playing career ends. And too often does the world rush you into these decisions, and you start being with people that aren't, genuinely really wanting to be with you, and things get so complicated as you grow. So I love the fact that you're making sure you mentioned that just simply take it day by day, guys. Take it day by day. You'll be fine. Just simply walk through it every single day and make sure you're living in your purpose. And the point you make about not ever wanting to need a client, that's when your shit gets really, really just diluted and people don't want to work with you. And I've seen it. I've seen it happen. I've seen people just have to shut the doors on their business because they just move too fast. So, kudos to you and all the work you're doing, man.
Thank you. Thank you for just everything that you're doing, man. Like you're such a great interviewer. It makes sense how many interviews that you've done, and it's always amazing connecting with really, really cool, insightful people that actually care as well. Because there's a lot of people in this industry for sure that just are putting stuff out or putting stuff out just to say that they've done it, kind of thing. When there's
That's
no
what I'm
intention.
saying, man. You got to do it. You can't just be out here bullshit, man. Cannot be out here just bullshit. So, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Where do you normally send them?
Yeah, absolutely. James Brackin IV, mainly on all socials. Instagram and YouTube is where I'm at most, but LinkedIn, everywhere you can find me pretty much everywhere for under them.
Right. And I will include all that in the show notes as well. So, James, the final thing I do to close out all the shows is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. Say you're the high school kid, you're about to go play a baseball game, you're really not wanting to go to college, and you know that these are kind of if you listen to your peers, these are your golden years, and you won't be much of anything if you don't go to college. Pretend that young high school version of James is in the Zoom room, and I give him some words of encouragement, and we will officially close.
I would say or two words. Stay questioning.
Mm,
Stay
that's it.
questioning.
That's
Whether
it.
it's your beliefs about yourself, the beliefs about the world, just stay questioning.
Continue to question. Listen, as a former philosophy major, I definitely appreciate that answer. So, all that being said, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.